We're going to go straight in and delighted to be joined by the President of Palau, Surangel Whips. Welcome. We were just hearing some very interesting views from Palau. I wonder if we could start by just giving a sense of what it's like to be in a Pacific Island state and to see the changes in the ocean happening around you. We're going to hear a lot about policy, but tell us about what it actually feels or looks like, perhaps a story of what you see, the impact of ocean and climate change from where you are.
So when I was in high school, I was a freshman in high school, I went on a boat trip with my father on a fishing boat. And we went to one of our islands that's about 360 miles from the main island. And when we went there, I remember the family living there, how big the island was. 40 years later, I went back with my children. And I could see that the island had already shrunk by about 2/3. The turtles that came up to lay eggs that night, that I was able to show my children, were laying eggs in areas that would be submerged by water. It was at low tide. Turtles, there was no more space on the beach. And so, I was thinking, we're concerned about the turtles, but what about the culture and the people that they're losing? So, climate change or natural disasters, is that the new name for them, is real. It's something that we experience it every day. Yeah. And what are we doing to combat that? So I just want to share also what we've done in Palau, and I call it a nature-based solution. But it's really the way we have managed our resources for thousands of years, and that's through a traditional management practice called the bull. So once again, when I was young, my father was a fisherman. He quit his management job and said, they're not paying me enough at the copra mill, I'm going to go fishing again. And scuba tanks had been introduced, so one efficient way to harvest lots of fish is use scuba tanks to harvest fish. I have to say that's not a sustainable practice, but very efficient and provided well for our family. But he then became a congressman and passed a law that said no more scuba tanks and scuba diving. That's not for fish. Take tourists out, that's a good thing, but not to fish. Later on, he then passed a law to ban the taking of bumphead parrotfish, because even though we didn't use scuba tanks anymore, we were still very efficient fishermen, so we were over-harvesting because people liked them. And the good news is, after it's been about 17 years since that law has been passed. One of the famous dive sites in Palau is now you can dive with these massive bumphead parrotfish. And I think the only place in the world that you can see thousands of them spawning together. But what's even more important is that each one of those fish produce 5.5 tons of sand a year, which is important for island building and mitigating against the impacts of climate change. So I guess my message is, we often say that we have to look at a whole of government approach. I think we have to look at a planetary approach to all our problems. And whether it's little things like protecting the parrotfish or not deep sea mining, putting a moratorium, because as we just heard, that column between 1,000 meters and 100 meters is sequestering carbon, which is the reason we're all sinking. So why are we out advocating for deep sea mining? It's all interconnected. And we have to stop treating the ocean as an unlimited resource or a garbage dump that we can just exploit. It's important for us to all work together to use it sustainably.
I love the way that you give the parrotfish example, but there's also the grand policy, and one of the tools you have at your disposal is votes for participation in international treaties. You are a country as important as any other, and you have been taking a lead on the High Seas Treaty, the BBNJ. So tell us a little bit about that and how you see progress. Where does it go from here?
Well, I think it's Palau is well known for its stance on conservation and initiatives, especially when it comes to marine protected areas. And it really started in the early 2000s, where we committed to 30% of the near shore being protected, created protected area networks, expanded to our EEZ. But you soon realize that what we do in Palau is really just a small part of the ocean. We need bigger impacts, bigger commitments, and it can't just be within our EEZs. It needs to be also the high seas if we want to really protect biodiversity and ensure that we can continue to use what we've been blessed with. So Palau, fortunately, was the third to sign on to the treaty, but we were the first to ratify. And I encourage all countries to ratify and get...
And we're now at what, 18, 20, is it ratified? And you need to get to 60?
We need to get to 60. So
what do you think the time scale is for that?
Well, we're hoping that at UNOC there'll be a big announcement, and our friends from the EU will, hopefully all 27 will come in, and that'll get us much more closer to the 60 that we need.
Is it realistic to actually get to 60 by UNOC, do you think, or is that too ambitious?
You can always dream the impossible.
Yeah.
But
why is it so hard, I wonder? I mean, why is it... You would think, because a lot of people sign. Why, from signing
I'm baffled. I'm baffled as to why it's so hard. If you go sign, it seems pretty straightforward. But I guess it's things like maybe some countries think that it might impact deep sea mining. It might impact their fisheries, and they won't be able to go out there and exploit and strip the ocean the way they've been doing it. But we share the ocean, and it's all of our duties to use it sustainably.
So let's talk a little bit more about the question of deep sea mining, because I think very eloquently your representative talked about why you have had your moratorium, but we also heard that there are other countries, other islands indeed, that take a different view. How are you handling that, as it were, diplomatically among countries that you cooperate very closely with as a group on the climate front? That's a delicate question, is it not?
Well, you bring up an important point, because at COP28, all of the Pacific countries got together and committed to 100% management of our oceans, 30% protected. And at that time, the Bezos Foundation came in with a $100 million commitment on what we call unlocking blue Pacific prosperity. And really the plan is to, first of all, protect those important spaces and manage the ocean, but also to build food systems and to provide food security, but then have a source of revenue that is fit for purpose and that we can use to help our Pacific Islands. I guess Sanjin said it's not good to balance, so I say optimize the use of our resources, ultimately being good stewards. And so we're together on that. But then when we go to the deep sea mining, there is a little bit of a difference. So, this last February, we were in Fiji as the Pacific Islands, and trying to have a Talanoa to discuss the issues that we have. And I think it goes back to like the parrotfish story. At the end of the day, islands or families are trying to survive and trying to find economic opportunity. And I think our Pacific brothers are looking for ways to keep their economies and their people prosperous. And so they see that as an opportunity. And so really what's important is building good economic resilient systems. You can't just talk about the conservation part or protecting and not talk about resilient systems. So, one of the things that we're looking at as the Pacific is when it comes to tuna, and I'll just give you an example. We're just in Honiara and talking about sustainable use of the oceans and tuna. And on an average can of tuna, I calculated that about 6 cents goes to the Pacific Islands. And that can of tuna may cost as much as $2. So 6 cents goes to the islands. How do we capture more of that value, like our friends in the oil industry have been able to manage, even though they're destroying the planet, but at least they've been able to pocket quite their fair share of that revenue. How can we also do that in the tuna industry so that we can provide robust economic resilience for our people, so that we're not tempted to go rip up the bottom of the ocean that may destroy the tuna that we all rely on. So, you know...
so a lot of it does come back to money, one way or another. And that's another theme I know that we're going to explore in different ways over the next 2 days. But the question of raising money for action on the ocean is something that you're also deeply involved in. How do you see that, and where do you think the action needs to be there? Where do you think the change has to be?
Well, like I mentioned, the Unlocking Blue Pacific Prosperity Plan, which really came out of the Palau Blue Prosperity Plan, was really about getting financing to build up good systems for protection, because we still have IUU, we still have all those challenges, and to identify those most critical areas and make sure they're protected. But at the same time, building up a fishing industry that has value added, that's sustainable, that is responsible, so that ultimately we provide food security, economic resilience to our people, but in a sustainable manner, and so that our children can continue to fish. And ultimately, the goal is healthy oceans, healthy planet. And that's being responsible. So we need investment by our partners to invest in these programs, because that's the only way we can ensure that we build good and healthy ecosystems for the planet.
Very briefly, because we're almost out of time, but the question of the money that's been cut off just recently by the cuts to US aid, how's the impact been felt for Palau and your neighbors?
So Palau was undergoing a marine spatial planning process. It's been put on pause because of funding, but that's just an example. And so it's really important that, first of all, I guess that we're accountable for what we use, but I think it's also important for our partners to see the value that's being created by the programs that are out there. So it's important for us to also go back to Washington and make sure they understand how important this program is to the planet. In Palau, you know, we like to study fish. And one of the things that we always have is paintings of fish on the building, whether it's a shark to represent courage and bravery, or the stingray to represent a solid foundation, steadfast and not easily swayed. But the one we always love to put on is the surgeonfish, and the surgeonfish on the abais represent unity, because surgeonfish, as they graze alone, do that, but when there is danger, they all come together. And that's really what we need. We need to come together. Stop being divisive and but come together, because it is a planetary crisis that all of us working together can solve.
Well, thank you very much. In 15 minutes, we've gone from parrotfish to the planet and then to the symbolism of the surgeonfish. I don't think you can do much better than that. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.